Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. NFL regular season over, pretty frenetic. Last week of the season was perfect for the NFL. A lot of crying, a lot of agita, a lot of real exciting stuff. And one of the results is the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs for the first time since 1999. Bruce Popko is the COO of the Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres, Pagula Sports and Entertainment, Buffalo Bandits, Rochester Americans. He worked at IMG, worked for the Cleveland Browns, San Francisco 49ers. He's had a lot of perspective, right, Dan?
Yeah, he has great perspective. I mean, you listen to the interview you did with him, and he touches on everything from stadium redevelopment to expanding a local market to, the idea of being a custodial owner in a smaller market. It's really, I think it's a great interview. So there's a lot of lessons in there. So it was really interesting to hear from him.
Bruce Popko, COO, Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres. Here he is now. Sports professor Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard, Keeping Score in the Boardroom. Diversity is the name of the game, and we're here at this primetime conference, the 10th annual, as we do every year. This is different. We have somebody whose head probably gets a little tired because he has 14 million hats that the guy wears. He's Pagula Sports Entertainment. He worked with the Jets, the Browns, a whole bunch of other teams, IMG, diverse experience, and now diverse and diverse. Bruce Popko, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
So we don't have enough time, but kind of go through your career from teams to IMG and then Pagula Sports.
Sure. It's really been almost primarily in football. Yeah. Grew up working for the New York Jets, went to the league office, which is in Manhattan, got recruited out of there to go to San Francisco, spent a few years there, then ended up migrating back to head east towards Cleveland. 12 years in Cleveland, split between the Cleveland Browns and then IMG, to your point. Working on the golf side of the business for 5 years, and then got the itch to try to get back into football, and went to the Bills, and have been there for starting my 10th season.
So before we talk about Pagula Sports a bit, because it's not just football,
sure.
It's lacrosse, it's minor league, it's everything. The IMG piece was primarily golf, and you're primarily a football guy. The skills that you need to master all of those jobs, are they more similar or are they more different?
Very similar. I think ultimately you're still relating to the people, whether it's a sponsor that you're looking to get on board, whether it's managing an athlete and something that they're doing. I actually managed two players during my golf days there. Patrick Harrington I did domestically, and then Natalie Gulbis on the LPGA side. So two very different personalities.
And he was winning when you managed him.
Yeah, Patrick had won the British Open at that point.
Did you have any input in
No, I was really his domestic stuff, so kind of helping out here and there and with some deals and things like that. Natalie was much more kind of really direct input, helping her out. She was at a point in her career where she had been injured a little bit, so she was trying to get back to kind of the stability of being on tour and playing a normal tour schedule. She was and still is one of the most personable. Yeah. I mean, someone that really you could send out into any situation and you knew would be, it would be, just fireworks and everybody would be excited about her presence. Still stay in touch with her today, so I mean, she's a great person. So.
But golf, women's, men's, lacrosse now, minor leagues in all contexts. But then Pagula Sports was really giving you an opportunity to cover the waterfront.
Yeah, for sure. It's, as I always say, sort of deal making is deal making. Yeah. Regardless of whether you're doing it in either a sponsorship and advertising realm, we're doing commercial real estate development now in kind of the near proximity to the arena. We're doing, lease fronting kind of the conversation even in Rochester with our minor league hockey affiliate, the Rochester Americans. So, yeah, sort of doing deals is sort of doing deals. You begin to draw in expertise for things that you don't have sort of maybe core competency against. But ultimately, like, being able to strike the deals is the most, inspiring part of what we do every day.
Let's talk about the Bills in the NFL first. New stadium, process, what's going on?
We're at this sort of inflection point where we've got, after the season, we'll have 5 years left on the current lease, for now what is a 43-year-old building. Yeah. Bones are still good. We put, a bunch of money into it 3 years ago now, so it's doing well. what the long-term viability just physically of the building is the next thing that we have to study. I think there's a lot of talk about, building a new building would be great, developing kind of this enormous downtown entertainment district, maybe around the arena where the Sabres play would be wonderful. It's a long process. I mean, if we sort of reflect on Atlanta, and Atlanta had their land already basically right next to the Georgia Dome, and that was still 10 years. So even if we kind of tell Terry and Kim Pagula, our owners, even if we start today, we're probably 8 years at a minimum, because we probably wouldn't go as grand as Mercedes-Benz, and what they did in Atlanta. But I will tell you, it's a very long journey. We don't have those answers yet. There's so many twists and turns, and really, the economic equation to take on that much debt in a market of our size is difficult than doing it in a top 20 market in the United States.
But Western New York loves the Bills, and the public-private partnership opportunities are still there.
For sure, and I will tell you, it's been a really strong partnership that we've had with both the county and the state of New York, Erie County and the state of New York. That will continue. The leadership there has been great. This will now become really kind of big stakes poker, though. I mean, this is really now, you're talking about what will probably end up being hundreds of millions of dollars deployed somewhere, either in the existing stadium for the next round of kind of super renovation, or trying to figure out if a new building makes more sense for us.
You realize some of the deals that have been done, and they're all over the map, but Steve Ross went into the super renovation, and now he looks back after $500 million, and his bones are fine, but it's an entirely new facility.
It is. It's an entirely new facility, and I think that much like his orientation, really supplementing and creating the best fan experience that he could possibly do is at the forefront, I know, of a lot of their thinking, because it was, to your point, it was good bones, but the fan experience elements of it were probably substandard, and I think he's changed that very dramatically. And to your point, you said you'd gone to a bunch of games. Just the vibe there is different than it was 5 years ago.
It's not. It's no longer just an open air stadium.
Right.
It's not an open air stadium.
Right. Yeah.
Retractable opportunity there.
I think that at least what Terry Pagula, our owner, has said is he likes open air. He likes the inherent advantage that we have of being open air. If I was to speculate, and it's really kind of more a little bit of my own speculation and just listening closely enough to him, I would think we'd probably do something more like Seattle, where you'd have a roof that would cover a good portion of the stands but still be open air, and kind of go with that sort of model.
Where's Toronto fit in the regional equation of all this?
Hugely important. You can't ignore 6-7 million people that are up here. Really that Southern Ontario side of us and that draw that we get from kind of Hamilton on down becomes a vital part of. They're a little bit less relevant in terms of season tickets, but they're very relevant in terms of individual games. Like, they really participate in game by game, kind of decide how they're going to interact, but it's a pretty big portion of our fan base.
Why are the cynics being listened to so much for the NFL now, business-wise? The ratings, the injuries on Thursday night. There's the same arguments, but people seem to be listening.
I think that when you're on top, the arrows kind of come with a little bit more frequency ultimately. The funny part is you never hear the ratings decline conversation ever done in a comparative sense. It's always done in absolute terms of just us, but you never put it against where is primetime falling? Where are other sports falling? And you sort of say it's also off of a much bigger base. So ultimately, to have that kind of drop off of that big a base, you sit and I'm always most concerned with what are the TV executives themselves saying.
Yeah.
And when they tell you that live sports entertainment programming is still kind of the panacea that fixes all, or at least kind of the North Star that they can rely on, you're in good shape.
How much do you care about what advertisers are telling you? So some of the media will take the outlying advertiser and point to some returns, like Papa John's, and say, hey, the NFL's not performing for me.
Yeah, and I think for them, they had a very specific orientation to the underperformance or lack of performance, which was around some player behavior, some player activity stuff.
Right.
I think, candidly, they're probably an outlier. We deal in the television advertising arena every day for both the big teams, because for the hockey team as well, we produce all our games. We sell all the advertising against that on MSG. And I will tell you, we don't really get complaints like that.
So, all right, so on-field, on-ice performance, let's shift to the Sabres for a second. You have a magnificent development plan for downtown Buffalo. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we are in a 21-year-old building in Key Bank Center, so we are sort of ripe for that next level of renovation. Same idea, really enhancing fan experience, really taking advantage of some of the parts of the real estate itself and the footprint to make sure we put enough programming in there that the fans want to be there early and stay late. I mean, it's as simple as that. We've built Harbor Center right next to it, which is 2 sheets of ice, largely oriented towards the amateur side of the game.
Yeah.
We've got the World Juniors coming in the end of the year now, and now all of a sudden we're beginning to sort of shift our focus or add to our focus some other commercial development. So really kind of beginning to extend the perimeter, create more of an entertainment district. We just bought an 80,000 square foot facility literally directly across the street from the arena, redeveloping that into a restaurant and a brewery. Labatt is relocating their headquarters there, their corporate headquarters there. So exciting times as we kind of are sort of right in the middle of a lot of developments going on in the city of Buffalo.
And my buddy Nick Shakevich would kill me if I didn't ask about lacrosse.
Yeah,
so
sure.
what's your thought about that?
Love it. I actually played field lacrosse in college, so I was a bad player on a really good team, as I tell everybody. So I have a huge affinity for the sport. My boys play it. My daughter played it as well when she was in high school. So Nick and I had lunch yesterday talking about kind of the future of the league. We're very, very bullish on it. Love where the Bandits sit in relation to the teams that are in the league. We look at ourselves as, we're kind of the old guard to some degree, 26 years in existence now. We lead the league in attendance, or we fight it out with Saskatchewan kind of now year in and year out with all the success that they've had. So I think the future is incredibly bright for that league, and I think Nick and kind of the captain's chair is going to be really great for us.
Pagula Sports, give me a sense of how the Pagulas feel about their investments, probably more so in Western New York. They're custodians of a very significant economic development engine.
Yeah, no, and I will tell you, they take that custodial responsibility incredibly seriously. And the great part about what they are trying to do, every project and every piece of sort of growth that we look at is really about creating jobs. And I think it's sort of not to be understated in this day and age is, Terry and Kim don't do it for vanity. They don't do it for accolade. They hate getting awards. They do it because they know that they can be a growth engine in our community, and they take that job very seriously.
And they've come to be recognized in the pantheon of fantastic community owners like the Crafts in New England and otherwise.
Sure, exactly. I mean, you look at Patriot Place, and while that was, certainly pioneering when it came on, took them a little while to kind of get the momentum, but you look at just what it is right now, what it represents. We're in a little different situation in terms of where we are geographically, but then you look at, we have the same kind of footprint surrounding New Era Field right now. It's not out of the realm of possibility that if we decide to stay in that stadium, that's the next wave of development that might accompany it.
And they put together great full service. They have an analytics component and otherwise that are first rate.
They do. I mean, you look at kind of across the board, and as much as we compete with them on the field, we can't stand the run of success that they've had. You have to admire everything that they've done and the diversity of their portfolio.
Yeah.
They're just like us. They've got, teams in multiple leagues that they manage and a lot of other business units, and it's become kind of what you have to do to gain, I think, the utmost relevance and really take advantage of the economies that you afford yourself. We have centralized a lot of our marketing, business development, finance across all these teams and all these entities, and there's great economies that are afforded us.
Speaking of economies and diversity, so do you wake up someday and say, which sport am I going to deal with today? How do you allocate your time?
You do a little bit, and you have to really make a conscious effort to be relevant sort of wherever you're going.
Yeah.
So you have to make a point of, I'm driving down in the stadium today, I'm going to go kind of walk the halls a little bit, I'm going to go to the arena today, be around the Sabres and the Bandits, I'm going to go to Rochester today. That's probably the biggest thing, is just learning now in this sort of newer position for me, that discipline of don't forget about anybody.
Do you have a routine, so it's Monday, Wednesday?
I don't. I will tell you, it really is a little bit more as kind of catch can,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's, you put the fireman hat on and you might be putting out fires a little bit, and then in the midst of it, you sort of fill out and say, kind of, what haven't I done this week, or what haven't I paid attention to this week?
What have you given up because you're running 48 franchises now? You look like a golfer because you're pretty low to the ground. So what are you doing? We can't play golf in Buffalo anyway for 9 months out of the year.
Like everything, life's about balance. I think that, unfortunately, we're sort of attached to our phones and that sort of thing. But I really haven't given up much. It's really just a matter of orientation, and a huge part of it has been delegation. A lot of the things that I used to feel like I had to be strictly involved in or see on the way out or whatever it was, you have to, we've trusted the management team we've put together. They're a very talented group of individuals. You got to go let them do their jobs.
So finally, where is Bruce Popko and where is Pagula Sports 5 years from now?
5 years from now, Tom is retired, hopefully, and not playing for the Patriots anymore.
There's a direct message.
Jack has maybe Eichel's got it, maybe his second ring on at that point. It's all trending in the right direction. I think that you sort of see where these franchises are going. You see where Buffalo is going as a city. When I got there, there were never cranes in the air. There were a lot of, closed up buildings, and it just, the orientation of the city and the city getting beyond kind of feeling sorry for itself or having to make excuses for itself has really changed. And I just see that it's going to sort of catapult, I think, from here.
Testimonial about sports and economic development.
Without a doubt. I mean, we're part of it. There's a huge medical community there. There's a lot of other things that are driving it, and we're really happy to be hitting it at kind of just a true renaissance moment.
So as work-life balance continues, next time the Bills are down south, we need to tee it up.
Yeah, for sure. Love to.
Deal, man.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
Bruce Popko, COO of the Pegula Sports Empire, which includes the Bills and the Sabres, and basically almost you could call them saviors of Buffalo sports and the attendant economic development. Dan Colarusso, our global editor at Reuters, has some questions relative to that interview. Dan, what you got?
Well, one, we have to thank the Pegulas for saving the NFL from Bon Jovi, right? That was the other option.
That's one, and also saving Buffalo from fracking. Remember, the Pegulas
right.
Made a lot of their money from fracking much of Ohio, but that's another story for another day.
But yeah, it's interesting. What I thought was interesting, what Bruce talked about in the stadium redevelopment and in the entertainment district he wants to build. You mentioned, and he mentioned that they're shooting for a stadium redevelopment, what they call a super renovation, likely, and it's being a public-private partnership that involves tax money, right? How much tax money is going to be available in Buffalo when New York gets hit so hard by the new tax plan coming out of Washington? How much is really going to be available for Buffalo's taxpayers? Not exactly in an economic boom. How much is going to be left for them to fool around with the stadium?
Very complicated question. When I was doing stuff with the NFL, I was in front of the people in Orchard Park and the county and basically said, Band-Aid until a new stadium gets done. Well, now it's time. And, the market's not that big, and the stadium has to be done to compensate for that market. That's number one. Number two is the tax-exempt financing, even though it was at risk, did not appear, the elimination of it, in the Trump tax bill. And so there's a little more than they used to have if the tax exemption was gone. But yet, obviously, as you said, there is a major hit here. And let's wait for the Trump infrastructure plan, if it ever happens, because stadiums may be included as part of infrastructure. By the way, like they were in the WPA in the 1930s, built the Orange Bowl and otherwise. But let's see if the Trump administration remembers that history.
No, I think it's a long shot. I mean, I think you look at it, and when you say to yourself, okay, let's say the Pegulas and Buffalo, the city, decide to go to the muni debt markets to finance this. That actually works almost against them, because if you look at the debt service that'll come out as the tax plan kind of flips around and puts a larger burden on individuals, that's going to be that unless there's some amazing magical renaissance in Buffalo. I think the economic order there. I think the Pegulas are great owners. I think Popko's a smart guy. But how much do you fight the tape? What I do think is interesting. He mentioned the entertainment district, and obviously the NHL is on the rise. I actually watched the Winter Classic, still for my money, the single best event in professional sports in America, in North America. Sabres lost to the Rangers, but it was a great game. They're a good franchise. He mentioned Labatt relocating its corporate headquarters to the Buffalo area. He mentioned expanding the Buffalo region to Rochester and Toronto. This is an example of Green Bay, Milwaukee. This is an example of taking a small market, stretching out, realizing you have some geographical elasticity, right, and making the market bigger than it actually is. Do you get that sense that that's something that's if you go back to your whatever business classes you took, does that make a lot of sense to you?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but it's a little more complicated because, Green Bay is a museum and a testament to football, and everybody's in it together, and so Milwaukee is the jewel that makes the whole thing shine economically. Of course, with the Packers' history, the Bills, old AFL team, Jim Kelly, 4 Super Bowls in a row. There is history there too, but let's remember that his concept of the region, Buffalo, Rochester, I guess to some extent Syracuse, also includes the biggest market being transborder. And everybody understands that Toronto citizens are Buffalo Bills fans, but they've also got the CFL. And people remember, including Roger Goodell, that they have an alignment with the CFL. They certainly don't want to create a regional competition where the economics are sapped out of Toronto into Buffalo. People respect the fact that you cross the border to see an NFL franchise, but there are a lot of issues there. The other issue of the entertainment district, well, it certainly works in Miami, it works in Dallas, it works in Phoenix. Working in cold weather climate, not so much. We're going to test it in the Super Bowl when everybody theoretically emerges from their gopher holes and go to the various events in Minnesota for Super Bowl 52 in February. But Green Bay, different story. People are used to going to that stadium indoors and outdoors. But maybe we'll see what happens in Buffalo. The entertainment district in downtown Buffalo, clearly important with the Sabres and the Bills. Stadium site has to be picked. We'll see what happens with that.
So in the stadium, just to be clear, they're not. So are they looking at a super renovation? Are they still debating whether they're going to have an actual new stadium, new building? Because he mentioned the bones were good. Have they decided, or are they still in the midst of making that decision?
Options open. Orchard Park, New York, is a suburb of Buffalo, and if you've ever gone to that stadium and been stuck at the end of a game, especially that Cincinnati-Buffalo snow fest in December, November, you realize how difficult it is to move traffic on a 3-lane road in and out. So they've got renovation issues, but they've got infrastructure issues. And, of course, you could make the argument that downtown development in Buffalo with the existing arena and a stadium opportunity near it would be more important and more needed than in many downtowns, just because of the nature of the way Buffalo's downtown is today. So, ironically, it may cost a lot, but it may be more beneficial to Buffalo than most other NFL cities.
That's an interesting point. What jumped out to you from this interview? I mean, you're the sports professor. What about it? I mean, obviously you have a lot of respect for Bruce. What was the key? What are some of the interesting things you caught on to in there?
Chuck Schumer, very important in this whole deal to put it together. Bruce Popko understands that you don't want to create a deadline, because if you fail, then what? He's got a lot of vertically integrated opportunities with the Bandits and the Sabres and the Bills and the Rochester Americans. He has had previous experience with other teams, including the Browns. He is a long-term business development guy, and I think the sky is the limit with the Buffalo Bills and his other entities, and of course making the playoffs doesn't hurt either.
Yeah, and I told you, I really like the way, and I don't mean this is in a way to denigrate the city, but I really like the way second city sports franchises are developing around this. You don't see a gun to the head of Buffalo. You see a cooperative, an owner who considers himself a custodian, and an executive team that apparently takes that very seriously. And I think that's, to me, that's a gratifying thing to hear from especially in a town like Buffalo, which has not had a great run of economic luck in the past 30 years or 40 years even. They have a good banking sector, and probably Labatt's going there is probably a nice deal. So there's a better base than in other industrial towns, but it has not been one of the great economic stories in America. So to have an owner who's a custodian and a steward and looking to create jobs and trying to model out an entire district as opposed to holding the city hostages is nice to see. And it's, again, one of those sports elements where it really works to a city's advantage.
The irony of the NFL season is the Jaguars and the Bills play each other in the first round of the NFL playoffs, two of the smallest markets in the NFL, both owners committed to community ownership, stewardship, economic development. Again, we'll see how that all shakes out as we head to the Super Bowl. 18 for 18, the top 18 news stories 2018. Check it out on Reuters.com, and we'll continue to move forward in the sports business world. Rick Horrow with Dan Colarusso, Keeping Score. Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. The producer, Alex Cohn. Associate producers, Freddie Joyner and Ryan Warner. Assistance provided by Carla Swadek, Tanner Simpkins, and Ronnie Sokach. And the executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso. I'm Rick Horrow. Thanks again for listening. See you next time on Keeping Score.